Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to The Analyst by Vajiraman Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections. In the analysis part, we'll first have a look at India's booming space startups, the challenges hindering the potential of these startups, and the way forward. In the next article, we'll talk about the issues plaguing India's public health systems and the ways to deal with it. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles with special reference to the UPSC Prelims 2025 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. So coming to the very first article of the day, this is with respect to India's space startups. So what we have been witnessing in the last 4 to 5 years is that there has been a booming startup culture with special reference to the space domain. And this is primarily because the government has been giving a lot of incentives to promote the private participation in this particular sector. And it is in this line that the cabinet has recently approved 1,000 crore venture capital fund, which is dedicated to the space sector. And this promises to catapult India to the forefront of space exploration and technology. But what you need to remember is that still there are certain challenges which are hindering the overall potential of this particular sector, right? So we'll look at what are all those challenges and what should be the way forward. Now, this is with respect to GS3, Science and Technology, Space Sector. Now, let's first talk about what do we mean by space economy in general, right? So we have a definition which is given by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. Now the definition I have written here is verbatim. It says that space economy refers to the full range of activities and the use of resources that create value and benefits human beings in the course of exploring, researching, understanding, managing and utilizing space, right? So you can just memorize this particular definition. Now, if we talk about the status of space economy in India, it stands to be around $8.4 billion as of now, right? And the overall share, India's share in the overall global market, it stands to be around 2%. Now, the government is aiming to enhance this number, that is $8.4 billion to $44 billion by 2033. And it includes the $11 billion exports. And it aims to enhance the overall share to 7 to 8%. Now, what you need to understand is that there are certain subsectors in the overall space economy. Primarily, there are 4 subsectors. First is satellite manufacturing. Second is launch services. Third is satellite services. And the fourth is ground segment. Now, if we talk about satellite manufacturing, see, please understand, for years, ISRO, that is Indian Space Research Organization, it has been catering to this need of satellite manufacturing for years. But there has been a growing demand of small satellites. And over there, the importance of private player comes, right? So what you need to understand is that in 2020, the overall market size of this particular subsector was $2.1 billion. It is projected to go to $3.2 billion by 2025 with a growth rate of 8.1%. Now, if you talk about launch services, see, it is a particular service where ISRO has mastery. And you would be surprised to know that from 2014 till 2019, ISRO earned a revenue of almost 170 million US dollars, right? Primarily because it catered to the needs of different nations for transporting their satellites to space, right? So this is a very important service, and the market size in 2020 was 567 million US dollars, and it is projected to go to 1,046 million US dollars, and the growth rate is supposed to be 13%. Now, if we talk about satellite services, now what do you mean by satellite services? See, for example, we have got remote sensing services, which is offered by the satellites. Or for example, we have got PVT services, that is position, velocity and timing services, right? And this sector, the market size was $3.8 billion in 2020, and it is projected to go to $4.6 billion in 2025 with a growth rate of 4.2%. Then we have got the ground segment. Now, what do you mean by ground segment? See, please understand that we have a position A on the earth and we have position B, right? And over here we have got the particular satellite, right? Now, satellite A, it is transferring the information to satellite, and then satellite is transferring that information to B, right? So the transfer of signals from point A to point B via the satellite, it is a part of the ground segment, right? And the market size in 2020 was $3.1 billion, and it is projected to go to $4 billion by 2025 with a growth rate of 6.9%. Now, let's talk about India's space startups in particular. See, in the last 4 to 5 years, as I've just talked about, India has seen a remarkable growth in the recent years with respect to the overall numbers of these startups, right? And as of now, there are more than 150 space startups in the country. And see, again, it's not like that they are focused on a particular area. They are working in different segments, be it satellite technology, be it the launch services, be it the satellite communication, be it the Earth observation. They are in all the domains in the space sector. Now, one of the most important bodies which has led to the facilitation or which has led to the enhancement of the private participation in this domain, that is enhancement of the startups in this particular domain, it is primarily because of INSPACe, that is Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Now, see, again, understand. It was primarily constituted in 2020. Now, this is a particular body which is trying to facilitate, trying to promote the integration of the private players in the overall space domain. And it has been instrumental, definitely. In the last 3 to 4 years, it has been instrumental in enhancing the private participation, in making sure that these players have adequate resources with them, right? And again, it is in line with this particular ideology that we have this particular venture fund. It was initially, the idea was given by INSPACe to the government, and now the government, it has fructified and it has led to the conceptualization of 1,000 crore venture capital. Now, it is facilitating the private participation, and as I told that it has led to the 1,000 crore venture capital fund. Now, please understand, what do we mean by this venture capital? See, understand. We have got these space startups, right? Now, the kind of activity they are doing, it involves a lot of risk, right? So while they're researching, while they're basically working on their projects, they need risk capital with them, right? But again, understand, we have got traditional players in the market like banks, right? Or other financial institutions. They are not really inclined to give resources to them, to give credit to them, because they perceive these space startups as risky borrowers. So over there, what becomes important is that they need to have adequate pool of resources with them. And here, this venture capital is very important because it would help them to give the adequate resources, and then these space startups can carry out their activities. Again, we have got such kind of venture capitals in different countries, be it United Kingdom, Japan, Saudi Arabia, including Saudi Arabia. Now, please understand why countries are actually focusing upon this. See, space sector is becoming strategically very important, and that is the reason different countries are making such kind of funds so that they can also enhance the private participation. Just take the case of SpaceX, right? How recently, what you notice, how magnificent was the portrait of the reusable launch vehicle, right? So again, they have the potential, the private players have potential to basically have disruptions in this particular domain, right? And that is the reason they need to be given adequate resources. Now, if we talk about the numbers, so what you can see is that the investments in the Indian space startups has increased substantially. Look at this. In the year 2020, it was $23 million, and it has gone to $1.85 million in 2022. Look at the number of space tech startups in India. It was just 7 in 2019, and look at now, it was 104 in 2022, and now it is obviously more than 150. Now, we have got two types of primary domains where these startups are working. First is the upstream, the second is downstream. Now, what do we mean by that? See, upstream is primarily transporting the objects into space, right? Doing the exploration part. Downstream is primarily using the research and technology which the upstream satellites are doing so as to make sure that they can use those technologies. For example, we have got the Earth observation. For example, we have the communication, right? So this is the downstream. We have got a number of players. For example, we have got Skyroot, we have got Dhruva Space, we have got Bellatrix, and then we have got Pixel, we have got Vasundhara, right? Different players are there. And here are some of the key achievements by Aadya. Then we have got Agnikul, Bellatrix, Dhruva, Skyroot, Pixel. You can have a look, you can read what their achievements have been. Now, let's talk about what is the importance of these startups in India. Why they are playing crucial role in the overall sector. First is innovation space technology. See, please understand, we have got a established player, that is ISRO, right? It's a public sector player. Now, it is working upon different technologies. It has had very important achievements. But what you need to understand is that we have got these private players and they have less resources. And what they're coming up with is cost-effective and scalable solutions, right? So they are bringing cost-effective and scalable technologies. And that is primarily handy for other players also, right? So if the overall cost is reducing, if the technologies are really disruptive, then it's a good thing, right? So that is what you need to know. Be it advanced satellite systems, be it the satellite communication, be it the Earth observation, they are doing a very good work, especially in the small satellite launch vehicle. This is a domain. This is one of the very important domain where the private players are having the mastery, right? Next is economic growth. See, again, it's not that we are only having the fruits in the particular space domain. Because see, again, if we'll have research, if we'll have growth in this particular space domain, then that would have other positive spillover effects on the other sector. For example, if we have got Earth observation satellites that can be handy for agriculture, right? They can provide us data with respect to timely sowing. If we have got these satellites, then we can have information with respect to the security, the defense, right? We can have proper knowledge with respect to the mining, the exploration, right? So and the government is also aiming to enhance the overall market to $44 billion by 2033. And it remains a very important component of the overall GDP growth. Then it also diversifies the economy. It tries to make sure that the overall economy is diversified, right? Next is that it also leads to job creation. See, we have got these startups. They are providing jobs to highly skilled people. But in addition, they're also providing many thousands of direct and indirect jobs, right? And it's not like that they're only providing in a particular, like, as scientists or engineers. They are providing in different domains, be it engineering, be it data analysis, be it software development, be it manufacturing of these components, right? Next is strategic national importance. As I told you, space domain. Space domain is one of the very important domains when we talk about the overall national security architecture of the country. And over here, these private players are enhancing the overall security aspect of the country, right? For example, we have got national defense. For example, we have got disaster management. For example, we have advanced satellite systems. Imagine if you have a particular satellite which can give you a very crisp data with respect to the surveillance. If it can give you the intelligence. So that is something which is of strategic nature for any country, right? Next is global competitiveness. Very important. See, again, as I said, that we have got few countries in the world, be it US, be it the countries in the European Union, or be it China, or be it Russia, who have now attained expertise with respect to the space domain. Now, it is in India's interest that India gives incentives to its private players so that we can also be self-dependent when it comes to these technologies, right? So that it's not like that we are dependent on US technology, right? What happened in Kargil? So in Kargil, India had to ask for US help in terms of the GPS, right? So that should not repeat. We need to be capable enough. Next is, what are the key sectors which are impacted by space technologies? See, first is supply chain and transportation, very important. We have also discussed in the previous analyst sessions that the logistics costs in India are way too high. And what the government is also doing is it is trying to reduce the logistics costs. And that can only be done if we have a proper, system where we have got as I told you, the PVT services, position, velocity, and timing services, right? For example, we have got the GPS, right? So if we have got these services, it would enhance the logistics efficiency. It would make sure that there is timely delivery of the articles. Next is food and beverages. Very important. See, what we are trying to basically say is, if we have got proper systems in place, proper services which is given by these satellites or space-based telecommunications, what we can have is a proper timely, it can optimize the deliveries, right? It can also make sure that the food we are consuming, if we have got experiments in the space with respect to the kind of nutrients which are there in the food, which should be there in the food, then that would enhance the overall nutritional content of the food, right? Next is defense, as I just said, that it enhances the overall intelligence and surveillance capacity of the state. Next is retail and consumer goods. If you have got a robust system with respect to the space domain, then that would obviously enhance the e-commerce, right? And that would enhance its accessibility even in the remote areas, right? Next is disaster management. if we have got these services, then it can basically have prompt action taken by, if we have a situation of a disaster, then prompt action can be taken by the state agencies and make sure that there is proper rehabilitation and make sure that there is proper rescue of the concerned people, right? Next is humanitarian efforts. So if we have got these satellites, if we have got these services that can track the migration, that can track the human trafficking, right? And that can be really helpful in the humanitarian aspect. Next is access to prosperity. Please understand that if we have got these satellites, that would definitely reduce the digital divide. And it would make sure that different people have access to education, have access to health resources, for example, let's say telemedicine, right? So these space technology, especially the integration of private player, is very important so that we can access all these technologies. Now, what are the challenges and issues faced by the space startups in India? See, again, what we have been saying is that definitely there has been a booming culture with respect to the startups in the space domain, but there are persisting issues. First is high capital requirement. As I just told you, that the kind of activities which these players are doing in the space sector, they require risk capital. And that risk capital can only be given if you have a particular resource, for example, a venture capital, as we have just discussed in this article. Because the traditional players, the traditional lenders, be it the banks, they are hesitant. They're not in a position to give money to these people, right? So the kind of activities they are doing, they are highly capital intensive. For example, let's say in satellite launch vehicles. And what you need to understand is, what is really important is that there has to be a consistent funding. It should not be just like one time you are giving fund and then, you're done away with. No, there has to be a consistent funding. So there has to be long-term funding. Then there's the issue of regulatory challenges, very important. See, again, please understand. The frameworks and the rules, the policies with respect to these private players in the space domain, it is still evolving. Right? It is still evolving because again, primarily, initially it was a public sector dominant sector. But now what you're having is the incorporation, the integration of the private sector. And that is the reason that the framework, the laws, the regulation, they are still evolving. Next is there are complex regulatory landscapes. The procedures are complex. For example, take the case of frequency allocation with respect to these spectrums, or take the case of licensing, or take the case of coordination with ISRO or IN-SPACe. So different private players are finding it difficult. Next is there are infrastructure gaps. See, these private startups, they often struggle because they have lack of resources and they don't have proper resources with respect to carrying out the test. The test beds are not there. The testing facilities are not there. Other facilities are not there. Then there is a talent shortage. See, please understand that, even though we have got very important institutes, prominent institutes, be it the Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, or we have got Indian Institute of Space Research and Technology, IIST, right? We have got great institutes. But again, what is happening is that people from these institutes, they are being absorbed by other players, right? Or in fact, they are being absorbed by players in different countries, be it US or the other countries, primarily because of the kind of incentives they are providing. So that is the kind of thing that is the kind of issues which Indian startups are facing. That is, they are facing difficulties to attract and retain these skilled professionals. Next is, there is a growing competition with respect to the international players, be it US, be it European Union, be it China. See, again, these are the countries who have enough resources with them, right? Resources in terms of finance, resources in terms of having these test facilities or other things. So again, what we are saying is that once they have well-established and significant funding, that basically poses a challenge because they have got the resources to carry out their activities. But on the other hand, you have got private players in the country which have the adequate skills with them, which have the adequate knowledge with them, but they don't have the adequate resources. Next is space debris and environmental concerns. Very important. See, as the numbers of satellites are increasing, there is the possibility of having catastrophes in the space. And that is something which is a challenge. So these private players need to keep in mind that they must adopt environmentally responsible practices. That is, they need to make sure that the kind of things they are doing, the kind of research they are doing, it must be sustainable, right? Again, you need to tell me that what is the name of that syndrome which we generally talk about when we discuss the space debris. Do mention in the comment section. Next is, what should be the way forward for the India's space startups? The very first is that there has to be, again, what we are saying is there is no denying to the fact that government is not doing enough. Government is giving a lot of resources, be it the financial resources or other things, but it has to increase. For example, in this case, the government has given the venture capital, so it must give, in different domains. Next is there has to be regulatory reforms. There has to be specific policies, robust policies with respect to the interactions between the state and the private players. Again, what we are saying is there can be this idea where you have got the state agencies and where you have got the private players who are collaborating and making sure that they basically share the resources. They share the testing beds. They share there is a proper technology transfer, right? Next is building infrastructure, very important. So there has to be adequate resources given for the launch pads, the testing facilities, or the manufacturing hubs of these components of the satellites. What you can basically have is satellite technological parks. Now, this is a new idea where you have got, what you're doing is you are making clusters, and in these clusters you are basically having niche technologies, niche area where different components of the satellites are actually being manufactured. So that can be also done. Next is fostering international collaboration, very important. So as you can have collaboration between the state agencies and the private agencies, you can also have collaboration between the international players and the private players in India, right? So with respect to the advanced technology and market, see, again, understand. Let's say if there is, if you have highly skilled, people working in India as a startup, they can basically collaborate, for example, with different startups around the world, with different private entities, say it be it the SpaceX. And what it would lead to is that there can be a possible technology transfer, and that can basically enhance the overall efficiency of India's space sector. For example, we can have collaboration with the NASA of US, with JAXA of the Japan, or European Space Agency. Next is there has to be focus upon training and skill development. Again, what you need to emphasize is that the curriculum has to be in line with the needs of the industry. The curriculum is still outdated. What is being taught in the colleges, it's still outdated. So you need to align it with the needs of the industry, right? Next is specialized programs and certifications are needed, especially for those people who are basically, let's say, working in a particular domain. They're working in a particular module with respect to the satellite manufacturing. So they need to be certified so that they can have more opportunities. Next is sustainability in space operations, very important. What we need to emphasize is that we have got eco-friendly satellite technologies in place, and primarily it is the private players who need to work upon this. Next is there has to be focus upon market expansion. It's not just that India is catering to the needs of its own domestic population, but again, understand, we have got some of the very big markets, be it Africa, be it Latin American countries, or be it, for that case, the Southeast Asian countries. Over there, the need for satellite-based services, is increasing. So India can basically capitalize on this aspect, right? So again, please understand, what we are saying is that there has been a growth when we talk about the startup culture in the space domain, but there are certain challenges, and these are the challenges. And again, what we need to have is a robust framework. We need to make sure that there are basically interactions taking place between the state agencies and the private players. There have to be more collaboration between the international players and the domestic players. And there has to be an enhancement in the overall resources, be it the infrastructure, be it the finances, so that we can witness a more booming startup culture in the overall space domain. So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular topic. Before we go to the next topic, we have a very important mains question, practice question. The question says, space startup in India have the potential to revolutionize the country's space economy. However, they face several challenges related to capital, regulation, and infrastructure. Discuss the current status of space startups in India, their importance, challenges they face, and the measures needed to unlock their full potential. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer to this question. So coming to the next article, it is with respect to the status of public health systems in India. So on November 15, a fire broke out in the neonatal intensive care unit in a hospital in Jhansi, that is Maharani Lakshmibai Medical College in Jhansi. And that led to the tragic loss of 10 newborns, right? And the fire was primarily attributed to a short circuit, right, which happened in this particular neonatal intensive care unit. Now, again, what you need to understand is, see, again, for years we have been working on to make sure that we basically have a robust public healthcare system in the country. Primarily, what you need to understand is that why we need to have a robust public healthcare system in India is because of its demography. of the status of the socio-economic status of its majority of its population. So what becomes really important is India being a welfare state, it has the obligation to have a robust public healthcare delivery system. But what we have been seeing for years is that there are big loopholes, there are issues, there are challenges, and because of that, such incidents happen. So what we need to understand is the challenges which we are facing and how we can basically deal with them. Now, this is with respect to GS2, social sector, health. Now, if we talk about the India's public healthcare system, what you need to understand at the first place is that it is one of the largest in the world. Primarily because of the geographical size of India, and second is primarily because of its population. So we have a population of around more than 140 crore people, and because of this, the overall public healthcare system is very mammoth, very large, huge. And again, understand that this public healthcare system, it is primarily managed by the central government and the state governments. Also, in some places, you have got the urban local bodies which have the public healthcare delivery systems. But in majority of the cases, you have got these the central government and the state governments, which are basically primarily responsible for this. Again, what is the overall aim of the public healthcare? See, the aim is to provide affordable and accessible healthcare. Right? Please, as I said, that we have got huge population in the rural areas, and in the rural areas we have got some of the remote locations. So over there, this public healthcare systems becomes very important. Now, if you look at the levels, we have got 3 levels. For example, we have got the primary level, right? In the primary level, we have got at the first stage the sub-health centers. Now, they basically cover a population of around 3,000 to 5,000. Then the next we have got the primary health centers. They basically cover the population from 20,000 to 30,000. Then at the next level, we have got the secondary level. Now, it primarily comprises of the community health centers, which caters to the population of 80,000 to 1,20,000. And then at the next level, we have got the sub-district hospitals. Then finally, we have got the tertiary level, right? Now, these are the super specialty hospitals, primarily in the metropolitan cities. Right. For example, we have got the district hospitals, and then we have got the super specialty hospitals, the medical colleges and hospitals. So in these 3 levels, we can basically categorize the overall public healthcare system in the country. Now, again, what you need to understand is that for over the years, the government has been coming up with a lot of policies. For example, we have got this Ayushman Bharat, where the government is providing the health insurance, and it is trying to cover more than 10 crore families, right? Again, it is a wonderful step, but again, there are issues with respect to Ayushman Bharat also, which the CAG report has also given out. Next is we have got the National Health Mission. Now, this aims to enhance the accessibility of the health services, especially in the rural areas. Now, what is the importance of public healthcare in India? As I said, that it plays a crucial role primarily because of the kind of socio-economic setup we have in the country, right? So we have, as a country, we have got people who are basically impoverished. We have got people who are poor. So in order to cater to the health aspect of those people, we need a robust public healthcare system, primarily to cater to those vulnerable sections of the society. Then again, the government has been focusing upon providing the universal access. That is, it has been in a focus that we need to enhance the overall coverage of the health, and it has been thinking to cover this universal health coverage, right? What you need to understand is that as of now, we have got more than 70% of the overall healthcare spending, which is primarily out of pocket. Understand that if you have the overall spending, more than 70% of that, which is out of pocket, that is a big burden on the individuals, right? And it is also one of the reasons that it is leading to poverty in India, right? So if you have got poor people who are basically taken out from poverty with respect by giving them livelihood opportunities, but if they fall ill, again they fall back into the poverty because they have to incur this huge out of pocket expenditure. Next is there are the issues with respect to equity in the healthcare. Again, understand that there are issues with respect to the health facilities between the rural and the urban areas, right? So for the rural population, it is very difficult to come to urban areas. It involves cost of traveling, right? It involves the other aspect also. So there is lack of provision of health facilities in the rural areas. Even when you have got these sub-health centers or the PHCs, they don't have the health professionals in them, right? They are isolated, right? Next is that we have to understand that there are a lot of marginalized communities, and we need to basically take special care of them. That is also mentioned in the directive principles of state policy. So if you can just mention the article which talks about the weaker sections of the society, right? Next is maternal and child health. See, substantial improvements have taken place, and it is primarily because of the public health sector which has been there in India. See, there's no denying to the fact that the public health sector is not working. It is definitely working, and it has brought transformational changes, be it the maternal mortality rates or the child mortality rates. But again, what we are saying is that it has a lot of potential, and that potential is basically not achieved. It's not being able to achieve primarily because of the issues which are plaguing this particular sector. Now, what are the issues which are plaguing the public healthcare system in the country? First is that there has been a permanent underfunding and budget constraints. See, please understand that if you go by the number, so in 2024, the budget in 2024, as a part of the overall budget, only 1.75% of the budget was allocated to the health aspect, and this number is very less, right? If you compare with the other developing countries, this number is very less. So the overall funding which is going to the public healthcare system, it is very less. So it was 3.3% of GDP in 2021. Now, understand, the public spending in other countries, if you take the example of Brazil or South Africa, it stands to be around 10 and 8% respectively. Can you imagine? 10% of the GDP is being spent by the government in Brazil. Then we have got 8% of the GDP is being spent by the South African government, right? What you need to understand is also there's an issue of low per capita expenditure. So if you talk about the per capita expenditure on health, it is almost $70 US. It was $70 US in 2020. And this number, the per capita expenditure for the other countries, be it Brazil or South Africa, it was around $1,000, right? Can you understand? Can you just see the difference in the overall health expenditure, right? Next is inadequate healthcare infrastructure. Then there are issues with respect to the healthcare infrastructure. See, if we talk about, let's say, the number of hospitals or the number of beds which are there in the hospital, the number is very dismal. So in India, we have got 0.55 hospital beds per 1,000 people. And the WHO prescribed number is 2.5 to 3, right? So there is a significant gap. Then there's severe shortage of healthcare professionals, especially in rural areas, right? It's not just about the doctors, it's also about the nursing staff, it's also about the paramedics, right? So understand that the doctor-patient ratio in India, it stands to be around 1,400, one doctor per 1,457 people, and this was in 2021. Again, what you need to understand is this is the average, but you have got regional differences also. For example, in this particular article, which has been featured in the Hindu, it says that the doctor-patient ratio in UP, Uttar Pradesh, it stands to be almost 1 to 2,058, right? So it's 2,158, right? So it's almost it's just twice of the national average, right? So that is what you need to understand. Next is there are disparities when we talk about the rural and urban healthcare setup, right? So in the rural areas, there is acute shortage of healthcare professionals. People are not even willing to go to the rural areas, primarily because they don't have the adequate facilities over there, right? They don't have the real incentives to go there and work. Then there are basically issues with respect to access to basic healthcare services. Even for the basic healthcare services, for the prevention of those diseases or for even small diseases, they have to come to the urban areas, right? Then it also incurs costs with respect to the traveling aspect. Then if you go by the data, so we have got the National Family Health Survey 5, it says that almost 52% of the rural households don't have a healthcare facility within 5 kilometers of their residence, right? So this is the condition. Can you imagine that more than 52% of the rural households don't have a healthcare facility in 5 kilometer radius of their residence, right? Then there are issues with respect to inefficiency and corruption. The overall healthcare setup, the public healthcare setup in India, it is basically plagued with corruption. There is huge corruption involved, and there is siphoning of funds, right? So corruption is one of the issues. Then there are issues with respect to bureaucratic delays. Understand, for example, we have got the funds which are released by the central government, then it goes to the state government, then it comes to at the local level. So it takes a long time, and there in this particular chain, you have this series of corruption which is there, right? Then what we say is that there are issues with respect to the resource allocation. There is gross mismanagement of fund, and this has been a lot of times pointed out by the Comptroller and Auditor General, right? And there has been delays in procurement of medical supplies, procurement of medical equipments, right? Then we have got the increase of disease burden and non-communicable disease. See, India has a double burden. What do you mean by double burden? See, on one hand, it has the brunt of infectious disease, be it tuberculosis, be it malaria or dengue. On the other hand, there has been an increase in the prevalence of non-communicable disease. Just before a few days, I discussed the issue of non-communicable disease in the country. So as of now, more than 60 to 65% of the deaths in the country, they are primarily attributed to the non-communicable disease. So this is a growing burden which has to be taken into consideration. Now, what should be the way forward with respect to strengthening the public healthcare system? The very first is there has to be an increase in the public spending. Very important. See, we are standing somewhere close to 3.3% of the GDP. This is very less because WHO has prescribed that it needs to go to 5% of the GDP, and there has to be increased funding. So increased funding would definitely help improve the infrastructure. We need to recruit more healthcare workers. See, again, what we are saying is provide some kind of incentives. You know, if a person has just passed out from a very good college, good medical college, he or she needs to have that incentive to work in rural areas, because obviously if you not provide the incentive, that person would move to urban areas, or in fact in many cases that person would go abroad. So the kind of incentives need to be there. Next is there has to be focus on the rural health. See, what we are trying to say is that there has to be better infrastructure and the recruitment of healthcare professionals, right? We need to have a specific policy. We have had the National Health Mission, right? But again, what we are trying to say is we need to have a specific policy for the rural aspect, because the needs of the rural areas are quite different from the urban areas. The situation is different. So we need to have specific policies for the rural healthcare setup, right? Again, what we can focus upon is telemedicine. Understand and remember that we had in COVID times the e-Sanjeevani, right? So that platform, basically the teleconsultation platform, proved really handy. It helped a lot of people. So the same mechanisms can be developed for the other aspects also. Then mobile healthcare units need to be developed so that they can basically go into the remote areas and cater to the health needs of the people. Then e-health solutions should be there. So we can have the telecommunications connectivity. Just in the last article, we talked about how satellite communication can help in this regard. So there has to be an enhancement in the overall connectivity also. Then enhanced human resources, very important. See, what we are trying to say is definitely we have invested a lot in the education, the medical education, but still the number of the doctors which every year India is getting from these colleges, it's quite low as of now, right? So we need to invest in the medical education also. We need to improve the working conditions, very important. We have been witnessing the violence which is being committed against the healthcare professionals. So there have to be stringent regulations also. And we need to make sure that there is a proper safety for these healthcare professionals. And we need to have incentives also. And again, what we are saying is that there have to be specific programs, specific training programs in different medical disciplines, medicine disciplines, be it obstetrics, be it pediatrics. So we need to have different training programs in these aspects. Then we need to strengthen the health insurance coverage. See, again, as I said, that definitely Ayushman Bharat is a good step, but there are issues with respect to the management, because again, the CAG report has talked about the nexus, the illicit nexus between the insurance providers and the healthcare facilities, right? So again, the scope of Ayushman Bharat has to increase and other insurance schemes need to come. Again, understand, the scope, they're not covering the entire population. Still, you have a majority of the population, the lower income households, who are not covered by these schemes. So their incorporation should be there. They need to be included in these schemes so that we can address this issue of high out-of-pocket expenditure. The efficiency has to be increased, right? So the overall efficiency and the governance has to increase. Over here, the awareness programs become important. So we have got information, awareness, education campaigns, right? So we have got IEC campaigns, information, education and communication campaigns, right? So they need to be there. Next is that we need to focus upon WASH, that is water, sanitation and hygiene. This is very important. See, in order to reduce the burden of the communicable disease, the infectious disease, we have to focus upon the WASH aspect. Next is lifestyle interventions, very important. See, we need to reduce the salt and sugar content. So primarily right now what we are having is processed foods, and they are very high in the sugar and the salt content, and that is primarily not good for the body. So what we are trying to focus is that we need to have, we had different campaigns, for example, Eat Right movement. So such campaigns need to come up with, and we have to have different lifestyle interventions also, right? Then we need to also leverage technology. See, again, there is precision diagnostics. That is, we are using the new technologies, for example, artificial intelligence, in order to have better diagnostic techniques, right? We need to have electronic health record systems, right? And as I said, that we need to also invest in telemedicine aspect so that we can basically cover even the remote population. Again, what we're trying to say is that definitely public healthcare system has had achievements in the past, but there are certain very serious issues with respect to this particular sector, as we have witnessed in this article, as what with the tragic loss of the 10 newborns in Jhansi, right? So what we need to focus upon is a strategy where we have got a specific policy, a robust policy for the public healthcare system, so that we can have a more robust system in place and these issues can be done away with. So this is what you need to know with respect to this article. Before we go to the simplified section, we have got the mains practice question. The question says, India's public healthcare system faces numerous challenges, including underfunding, infrastructure gaps, unequal access across regions. Critically examine the current status of India's public healthcare systems, its key issues, and the way forward to achieve equitable and quality healthcare for all. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. So coming to the simplified section, we have got the first article, that is, how sustainable is India's path to net zero with 45 years left. See, the gist of the article is that what the article is saying is that by 2070, the overall power demand would rise to tenfold from what we have as of now, right? And if we want to secure, if you want to source all of that power from the renewable energy, that would have trade-offs. That is, it can have irreversible consequence on the forests, on the nutritional aspect of the country, on the food aspect of the country. So that is where the authors are giving a new way, a new suggestion, how India can proceed with respect to its the target of becoming net zero by 2070. So that is what the article talks about. So the article says that we have got every year we have got different, the climate summits which are organized, that is a conference of parties. But this year, that was primarily in the aspect, from the perspective of the 2024 US presidential election, will likely have a greater impact on the planet's climate future. Now, reason is very simple, primarily because of the kind of policies which people are thinking Mr. Donald Trump would have, because he doesn't believe in this aspect of climate change. Now, again, important challenge in combating climate change, and that is operationalizing a global cooperation towards a common cause, even when the national interests don't align. So this is one of the challenge. Next is, see, we have got different kind of countries, for example, the developing countries. Now, what the author says is, for example, an economically developed country with sufficient resources per capita may not find it necessary to change the course of the development. Whereas a populous country, for example, India, it would need to basically have changes in its overall strategy, in its overall developmental aspect, right? A few years ago, we had the Glasgow summit, right? Where India committed to achieving the net zero carbon emissions by 2070. Then it has implemented several policies. And again, if we are basically on this track, then there would be certain very much big challenges in place. So the journey will not be without challenges, especially the financial ones. Other resource constraints, for example, land or water availability, limiting the choice. So again, what we are saying is that this is a very arduous task, a very tough task, and there are different challenges, and it basically limits the choices which the policymakers have. Now, what happens is that climate change is becoming more evident. We have got the scientific consensus that in order to avoid the devastating and irreversible consequences, the world must basically keep the global average annual surface temperature to within 1.5 degrees Celsius of the pre-industrial levels. That is right. The current increase is at least 1.1 degrees Celsius over the 1880. The sixth assessment report of the IPCC, that is International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it basically estimated that from 2020, the remaining global carbon budget for 50 to 67% chances of limiting the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius is 400 to 500 billion gigatons, right? Billion tons, sorry, and of CO2. And annually, what now we are seeing is that the annual global emissions are around 40 gigatons of carbon dioxide. Thus, what it means is that the overall emissions need to reduce substantially. That is, the net global emissions must drop drastically to stay within the carbon budget. Now, is the net zero equitable? See, we have got the developed world. Now, again, primarily the responsibility with respect to the climate change, who has done it? It is primarily the developed countries. So they need to be having this responsibility, but what they are doing is they are not taking the responsibility, be it in terms of the transfer of technology or be it in terms of transfer of finance, right? So what the authors are saying is that the developed world, having caused the problem of climate change, is expected to lead in this transition and reach to net zero emission scenario well before 2050, so that it can basically allow more time for developing countries to balance their developmental needs with the climate action. But again, what we are seeing is that these expectations are not being met, and what we want is that these developed countries are also expected to help finance climate actions, but this hasn't materialized. Developing countries, and with special reference to the small island developing states, SIDS, are bearing more than their fair share of brunt, right? So we have got some of the islands in the Pacific which are already inundated. So they are actually bearing the brunt of the actions which were basically carried out by the developed countries. So overall, neither the climate change nor the climate action is currently equitable. COP29, Conference of Party 29, is expected to build a consensus on the level of financing required. Again, what the authors are giving you is a very good number. They are saying that India's per capita emissions are among the lowest in the world. However, what it is trying to say is that, however, according to the World Inequality Database, the per capita emissions of the richest 10% are 20 times greater than that of the poorest 10%. And in absolute terms, almost half of the country's total. So again, what we are saying is, see, overall, the per capita emissions of India are quite low. But here also what you see is there is huge inequity, where you have got the rich sections which are primarily responsible for the overall majority of those emissions which have been carried out, right? India's size and diversity mean that it's a country of countries. For example, we have got different sections of society. We have got the rich, we have got the poor, and some of them are more polluting than others, right? So some of these sections of society are polluting more than the others. Also, India lacks the carrying capacity to support the developed world lifestyle. So we should not aim for having a lifestyle of the kind the developed countries are having, right? Of the kind of lifestyle practices they are having. So we need to have more sustainable practices with us. India will run into significant food shortage due to the groundwater depletion by 2040s, extreme heat stress in urban areas, what we call as urban heat island effects, due to the ever-increasing vehicular pollution and air conditioning use, irreversible biodiversity loss due to non-ideal land use changes encroaching on the habitats. So this, if we are on this trajectory where we are aiming to basically have the kind of lifestyle which is being followed in the developed countries, then this is a concern. Now, what should be the new consumption corridor? What we are seeing is the consumption rises unchecked and India electrifies all the end use applications. So if we basically the consumption is rising, and if we electrify all the end use, the power demand could increase to almost tenfold by 2070. So what we are having a scenario that if we want to electrify everything, the end users, then the power demand would rise to tenfold from what we have as of now. Now, if we meet it via the renewable energy, it would require 5,500 gigawatt of solar and 1,500 gigawatt of wind from the current 70 gigawatt of solar we have now and 47 gigawatt respectively. That is with respect to the wind power. This target is achievable if India's only priority is to expand renewable energy generation capacity. But if India is to maintain food and nutritional security, see, obviously we have got different priority. It's not like that we just want to switch to renewables. We also have to maintain the food and nutritional security aspect. So we cannot just think about the renewable energy. But if we are just thinking about renewable, then it would have repercussions, serious consequences on the food and nutritional aspect. Increase food forest cover, preserve the biodiversity. As well, these energy targets will become very challenging. By modeling land use change dynamics, the authors in this particular article have found a better way. They are basically giving a suggestion where what they have said is that we would require 3,500 gigawatt in comparison to 5,500 gigawatt, which was earlier said here, right? And 900 gigawatt of wind, right? So if we basically follow this kind of approach, so we have got two scenarios, right? Let's say we have got first scenario and second scenario. First scenario is where we are having the consumption would rise to, the need would rise to 5,500 gigawatt of solar and 1,500 gigawatt of wind. But this is not sustainable. What the authors are saying is a second scenario, a second pathway, which would require 3,500 gigawatt of solar and 900 gigawatt of wind. But this would want to have more sustainable practices. That is, people would have to basically have more sustainable practices if they want to have this second pathway. In sum, India has a tough balancing act to pull off, availing good quality of life to a large share of its population, while working towards climate adaptation and mitigation goals. To this end, it is important to recognize the pitfalls of economic models. So we have had this Kuznets environmental curve, right? Which basically says that beyond a threshold, economic growth can be decoupled from carbon emissions, right? So we'll just study also what is Kuznets curve, that is with special reference to the environmental part. So it says that after a certain economic status has been achieved, the environmental degradation reduces. But in reality, this has happened. This hasn't happened with many countries, right? In reality, even the richest countries haven't achieved this decoupling between the economic growth and the environmental degradation, right? This is why it is in our best interest to not aspire to achieve the lifestyle which the West is having. We need to go with more sustainable lifestyles. Instead, we need to envisage long-term strategy incorporating sufficiency consumption corridors. We need to have those kind of strategy which basically emphasizes on having more sustainable aspect, with a floor well suited to meeting our developmental goals and a ceiling of access that will help avoid unsustainable growth. What we need to have is both supply and demand side measures. Demand side measures to help maintain this corridor consumption will keep us on a sustainable pathway. Our power consumption here could increase 6 or 7-fold, right? So if we go with this particular pathway, the overall consumption would increase to only 7-fold rather than what we initially were saying as 10-fold. Now, what are the different measures which the authors are talking about? First is the demand side measures include use of better construction materials, right? So we can use basically the fly ash bricks, right? Passive design elements to provide thermal comfort. That is, we need to have proper ventilation in the houses so that the cool air automatically comes in the summers, right? And in the winters, it keeps the house warm. That doesn't require air conditioning. Energy efficient appliances, public or non-motorized transport. This is very important. We need to focus upon public transport more and more, which the Chinese are already doing, right? Railways for intercity travel, local products to reduce the demand for long-haul freight. Now, this is important. If we'll have the local manufacturing capacity, then we will not be in a position to depend on the items from the other countries. And if we will not do that, obviously the transport would reduce, and that would lead to lower emissions. Mindful dietary choices, alternative fuels in industries, and in addition to some electrification. On the supply side, what the authors are saying that India needs to further decentralize energy production. So we as the government is also doing it. We have got the rooftop solar cells and also the solar pumps. So there has to be a diversification. A decentralization with respect to the energy production. It should also continue to expand its nuclear power generation capacity to diversify its energy mix and complement a grid more dependent on intermittent energy sources. See, we have got the solar and the wind. Now, these sources are intermittent. So we need to have that capacity in place where we can adequately integrate these sources into the main grid. That is what the authors are talking about. Nuclear power could also offer a precious low carbon baseload energy to help the government effectively phase out the national economy's dependence on fossil fuels. That is what the authors are saying. They are also basically advocating that we need to also go for nuclear energy because that also is something which is a cleaner form than compared with the fossil fuel. So that is what the authors are talking about. Over here, we have got two prelims boosters. Let's first talk about the diagram of Kuznets curve. See again, the diagram primarily talks about two concepts. On the particular axis, on the y-axis, we have got the level of environmental degradation, and on the x-axis, we have got the economic growth. It says that initially there is increase in the environmental degradation, but after a certain point, we have got the reduction in the overall environmental degradation. However, there is the economic growth, but this hasn't actually happened with many countries. So the environment Kuznets curve suggests that economic development initially leads to deterioration of the environment, but after a certain level of economic growth, as a society begins to improve its relationship with the environment, levels of environmental degradation reduces. From a very simplistic point of view, it suggests that economic growth is good for the environment. However, critics have argued that there is no guarantee that economic growth will lead to improved environment. In fact, the opposite is often the case. At the least, it requires a very targeted policy and attitudes to make sure that economic growth is compatible with improving environments. One case point which I would like to mention here is that we generally say that developed countries, they are actually emitting less greenhouse gas emissions. However, if you look at the kind of resources they are consuming, it is way too high in comparison to the developing countries. So how this is happening? See, what they have done is they have shifted their manufacturing plants and hubs in developing countries. And those countries are now making products for these developed countries, and they are now emitting the pollution, right? And then the developed countries say that now, see, you are emitting the pollutions, but it is primarily for these developed countries. So that is what you need to understand, right? Next is the commitments which were given by the Prime Minister, the Panchamrit. So we have got the first as 500 gigawatt non-fossil energy by 2030, 50% of energy from renewable by 2030, reduce the carbon emissions by 1 billion tons till 2030, reduce carbon intensity of the economy by over 45% by 2030, and then net zero by 2070, which this particular article talks about. So this is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, we have got the appointment of the new Comptroller and Auditor General. So we have got President Draupadi Murmu, who on Monday appointed the 1989 batch Indian Administrative Service Officer K. Sanjay Murthy as the new Comptroller and Auditor General. As of now, Mr. Murthy is currently posted as Secretary, Department of Higher Education. Now, this is a very important opportunity, a good opportunity to discuss this particular office in detail. Now, the Comptroller and Auditor General is the supreme audit institution in the country. Do remember, right? So it's the supreme audit institution in the country, and it is an independent constitutional authority which is responsible for auditing the central and state governments and public sector organization. Now, again, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar once said that if you want to ask me that which is the most important public official in the country, it is the Comptroller and Auditor General, and he acts as the guardian of the public purse, right? So the CAG ensures the accountability, the transparency, and the efficiency in the use of public resources. This office plays a crucial role in maintaining the financial integrity of the country. Very important. Now, if you look at the constitutional articles relating to the CAG, we have got Article 148, which talks about the appointment, tenure, and independence of the Comptroller and Auditor General. Then what it says is that he is appointed by the President of India and holds a term for 6 years or until the age of 65, whichever is earlier. Removal is similar to that of Supreme Court judge. Do remember. Then we have got Article 149, which specifies the duties and powers of the CAG, and it also empowers the Parliament that it may by law also define the scope and extent of CAG's functions. Next is Article 150. Now this basically says that the accounts of Union and the states be maintained in a manner prescribed by the President in consultation with the CAG. So please understand that over here, the President has to consult with the CAG with reference to the kind of accounts which are to be maintained by the state and the center. Article 151, it talks about the submission of audit reports by the CAG to the President or the Governor, who then basically lay it down in the Parliament with respect to the President and in the legislative assemblies with respect to the Governor. The CAG, if we talk about Article 279, the CAG certifies the net proceeds of any tax or the duty for the distribution of resources. Very important. So there can be a question in the prelims that who certifies the net proceeds of any tax? It is the CAG. Article 266, the CAG audits all the receipts and expenditure of the Consolidated Fund of India and the Consolidated Fund of each state including the public accounts and contingency fund, right? So this is what you need to know. Then we have got Article 280, which deals with the Finance Commission. So we have got the involvement of CAG in the Finance Commission's process of revenue sharing between the center and the state government. That is, if the Finance Commission want, it can basically seek input of the CAG. Next is, what are the key functions? First is auditing the government accounts. As we have just discussed, the CAG audits all the receipts, expenditures and the accounts of the government, including the bodies or authorities substantially funded by the government. Then performance and compliance audit is also done, ensuring that the government programs achieve their objectives efficiently and within allocated resources. See, the audit is not just with respect to the legal aspect. That is, this much amount was sanctioned and that has been used. No, it's also with respect to that how efficiently that particular resource has been used, right? So if there is a mismanagement with respect to a particular fund, then CAG can also point it out. Public sector audits. The audits of public sector enterprises and autonomous bodies is also carried out by the CAG, certifying tax revenues for equitable distribution between the union and the states. Now, what is the significance of CAG? The first is accountability. Very important. So it helps the parliament and the state legislature to hold the executive accountable for the use of public funds. So this is where what you see is the responsibility. That is what you manifest is a parliamentary form of governance, where the executive is responsible to the parliament, to the legislature. Financial transparency provides a transparent account of the government's financial operations and expenditure. Guardian of the public purse, as I just told, ensures that a taxpayer's money is spent in accordance with laws and regulations. So this is a very important office, and as I just told you, that B.R. Ambedkar said that this is the most important public official in the country. So you can have a look at this particular article. That is it for you to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, this is with respect to a report by the Global Forest Watch. Now, this has been completely rejected by the Union Ministry for Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Forest Survey of India. Now, we will see what this article is all about. Now, the Global Forest Watch basically had said that India had lost 2.3 million hectares of tree cover, and this has been said by the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Forest Survey of India as devoid of facts, ground reality and internationally accepted norms. Now, the issue is important because NGT basically asks to submit an affidavit. The National Green Tribunal asks the Union Ministry and the Forest Survey of India to submit an affidavit with respect to this particular report, right? The NGT's principal bench, which took the suo motu cognizance of the report by the Indian Express and the Global Forest Watch, the NGT bench had issued the notices to the Ministry, FSI and CPCB seeking their response on substantial issues. Now, the affidavit, what the affidavit says is that the country's forest cover was reported by FSI's, that is Forest Survey of India's biennial India State of Forest Report. Now, this is a very, very important information which tells you that India State of Forest Report is published by the Forest Survey of India and it is based on internationally accepted criteria. However, it added that the Global Forest Watch parameter for its forest cover was not based on these internationally accepted criteria and it might have a different methodology and definition for the assessment. As per the India State of Forest Report of 2021 compared to State Forest Report of 2001, there is a net increase of 58,891 square kilometer in the forest cover and 14,277 square kilometers in the tree cover. So overall, the total increase from 2001, that is with respect to the report of 2001 until 2021, has been 74,168 square kilometers. There's this net gain in the forest and tree cover. The India State of Forest Report of 2021 is the latest data because the report of 2023 has been delayed. Now, while preparing the report, all the lands measuring more than 1 hectare, important, can be asked in prelims. Do pay attention. 1 hectare with a tree canopy of more than 10%, irrespective of the ownership and legal status, including orchards, bamboo and palm, are defined as forest cover, although tree patches of less than 1 hectare outside the forest areas are also considered. Experts have questioned this inclusion of tree-lined avenues or orchard plantations. Now, they're basically fighting over, there are issues with respect to the inclusion of the kinds of land you have. So this particular report is trying to include everything. But the experts are saying why you are including this particular patch of lands, be it the orchards or the avenues, right? Or small privately owned areas. According to the Global Forest Watch, the tree cover was derived from the satellite data and it does not discern the land use. It relies on a standardized definition of forest adopted by the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, which takes into account the biophysical criteria, that is the tree height, the canopy, the extent of trees, and the land use criteria. So two criteria are considered by FAO. That is, the first is biophysical criteria and the second is the land use criteria. The affidavit also challenged the global Forest Watch finding that an average of 51 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year was released into the atmosphere as a result of tree cover loss in India, right? So if you are equating with the tree loss with the emissions, it was 51 million tons, and this has been rejected by the government. According to the Global Forest Watch data released in April 2024, India lost 2.33 million hectares or 6% of its tree cover between 2001 and 23, 60% of it in 5 northeastern states of Assam, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland and Manipur. Now, it attributed around 18% of the total tree cover loss to the decline in the humid primary forest by 4.14 lakh hectares. Now, what is really important is to know about some of these bodies which are mentioned in this particular article. First is Global Forest Watch. Important, can be asked in prelims. GFW is an online platform that provides real-time data and tools for monitoring the forests worldwide. It is developed by World Resource Institute. Do remember, it allows the governments, companies, researchers and citizens to track deforestation, forest degradation and conservation efforts. What are the features? First is it is using the satellite imagery and machine learning for tracking the forest change. Second is it provides data with respect to the deforestation alerts, land cover usage and carbon emissions. Then it has an open access to interactive maps and reports. What is the significance? It helps monitor the illegal logging of woods, forest fires and conservation projects. Assist the policymakers and the NGOs in implementing sustainable forestry principles. Important, can be asked. Next is CPCB, very important body. So we have got the CPCB as a statutory body under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, established under the Water Prevention and Control Act of 1974. It also performs the functions of Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1981. So this is important. Do remember that it was constituted originally under the Water Act, but it has functions with respect to the Air Act also of 1981. Functions, monitors air and water quality. Now this particular institution is important because it celebrated 50 years in 2024. Monitoring air and water quality, setting the environment standards. So we have got different standards which are set by the CPCB, and enforcing the pollution control laws, coordinating with the state pollution control boards for environmental protection, conducting research and development in the pollution control technologies. What is the significance? Key player in the environmental governance in the country, publishes reports, for example, and AAQ, so which is National Ambient Air Quality Index, right? And water quality assessments. So this is a very important body. Next is Forest Survey of India. You need to know if it is an organization under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, responsible for assessing and monitoring the forest resource of the country, established in 1981, conducts biennial forest surveys to map the forest cover, and comes out with India's State of Forest Report, the Forest Survey of India. Provides the geographical information system based mapping for the forest management, conducts studies on the forest fire management and carbon sequestration potential. Next is significance, crucial for policy making and meeting global commitments like Paris Agreement, helps monitor afforestation and deforestation trends in the country. Next is the National Green Tribunal, very important. NGT is a specialized judicial body, a tribunal, a quasi-judicial body, established under the National Green Tribunal Act of 2010 to handle the environmental cases. It aims to provide quick and effective solutions. That is what the objective of setting up the tribunals is all about, right? To disputes related to the environment protection and conservation. So tribunals, just for the revision's sake, first is that to provide expedite solutions. Second is to provide expert solutions, right? Deals with the cases related to the Water Act, Air Act, Environment Protection Act and Biodiversity Act. Has the authority to impose fines and issue directives. Significance, fast tracks the environmental cases, reducing the burden on traditional courts. Landmark rulings including the actions against the industrial pollutions, river rejuvenation, and curbing illegal mining activities. This is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the next article, this is with respect to a statement made by the Minister for Port, Shipping and Waterways, Mr. Sarbanand Sonowal. Now, he has said that the Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor is operational. He has also talked about India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Now, what the minister has said is that the Chennai-Vladivostok Eastern Maritime Corridor has become operational and is carrying oil, food and machines. He has also said that India and Greece would work together on the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. India aims to be the best maritime nations in the world, and he has also outlined the Maritime Vision 2047. Out of the 139 maritime nations, marine nations around the world, we want to be on the top in all the verticals, whether it be the port operations, cargo handling, ship ownership, shipbuilding, ship repair, recycling, technology, and legislative reforms. Now, can you just tell me which is the very important place in the country which is known for ship building, right? So just tell me, it's in Gujarat, right? And ship repair also. So basically, they are leading the inaugural edition of Sagar Manthan, the Great Oceans Dialogue, organized by the ministry in the partnership with Observer Research Foundation. So bilateral talks are also being held with the Greece Minister, right, of Maritime Affairs and Insular Policy. So next is that what he said is that the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor has become operational. The corridor would reduce significantly. It would lead to the significant reduction in the time required for the transport of cargo between India and Far East. Just before a few days, we covered Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. Again, it has been featured. So it is a probable question for the prelims. Do pay attention, right? By up to 16 days and from 40 to 24 days, and a significant reduction in the distance by up to 40%. The IMEC announced during the G20 summit in India, which was held in India in 23, it goes from India to UAE, that is United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and then European countries, Italy, France, and Greece. We'll also have a railway line, sea route, totally over 4,800 kilometers. The Chennai-Vladivostok Maritime Corridor had become operational, and along with the port in the Bay of Bengal, Paradip, Vizag have also the connectivity. So it's not just the Chennai, but also we have got the ports of Vizag and Paradip, which also have the connectivity. Now, again, his remarks have come in the backdrop of the apprehensions of the progress of the IMEC, primarily because of the volatile situation we are having in the Middle East, that is the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? Now, let's talk about the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Again, just look at the map. It starts from Mumbai in India, also in places in Gujarat. Then it traverses via the sea route to the UAE, the port of Jebel Ali. Then it goes to Saudi Arabia in a particular place, and then via the road links, via the rail links, we have got, it has a connectivity via the Saudi Arabia to Haifa port in Israel, and then through the maritime connectivity, it goes to the Piraeus port in Greece. So you need to remember, then further to the European part. Now, as I said, that it was announced during the G20 summit in New Delhi. Then participants are India, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, European Union, and the United States. Strengthen the economic connectivity and facilitate the trade, energy, and digital cooperation between India, Middle East, and Europe. Railway network, again, there are different components. First is railway network, connects Middle Eastern countries, enhancing the regional connectivity. Then it also has a sea link, as we just saw, facilitates the maritime trade between India and the Middle East. Energy infrastructure includes the pipeline to transport renewable energy and hydrogen. Then it also focuses upon the digital infrastructure, that is, it includes the high-speed data links and fiber optic connectivity. So don't just think that it is limited to the only transport aspect. It is also linked to the digital connectivity, right? Next is strategic importance. First is economic growth. It aims to boost the trade and development across the participating regions by reducing the transportation times and cost. See, why this has been conceptualized is, initially the route was with respect to the Red Sea, right? This is the conventional route, but it was longer and there were issues with respect to this particular route. So now we are having this particular route so that we can optimize on this aspect and we can have more interlinkages with different countries, right? Geopolitical influence presents an alternative to China's BRI, very important, offering a US and EU-backed infrastructure model. Energy security helps in diversifying energy sources, especially in renewable energy and meets the regional energy sustainability. Understand that BRI as a project has led to debt trap for many of the countries. So this is a particular solution. That is, the IMEC corridor is a potential solutions in order to make sure that the countries don't fall into that debt trap which is being practiced by the Chinese, right? Benefits for India, exports growth, so easier access to markets in the Middle East. It would enhance the markets for India. Job creation, infrastructure projects, particularly in transport and energy, likely to generate employment. Digital expansion, opportunities for India's tech sector in the Middle East and European markets. So we have got many companies like Infosys or the Tatas who have already gone to the Saudi Arabian market, right? So it would also enhance the opportunities for other companies. Next is, what are the challenges? First is political instability, as we have been witnessing. The issues with respect to Israel-Palestine. Right now, the situation is very grim. So that is a potential challenge. Possible risk in potentially sensitive areas, high cost, extensive financial and logistic resources are required. Coordination. See, the success, it depends upon the coordinated policies among different countries. And that is primarily not possible now because of the tough situation in the Middle East. Future prospects, IMEC could reshape the global trade patterns, enable more stable, diversified supply chains, lead to more important supply chains, more reinvigorated supply chains, and position India as a central hub in the growing transcontinental trade network. Now, as the article mentioned, we have got the Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. See, again, understand that what we are trying to say is that initially, the conventional route is from Mumbai, and then it goes to the Arabian Sea, and then the Red Sea, and then Mediterranean Sea, and then further to the Russian part. Now we are saying that we are trying to connect the Chennai with that of the Far East region of Russia. Now this particular Far East region of Russia, it is very much rich in different resources, be it the petroleum resources or the mineral resources. And again, it's not just about the resources, but it also gives a strategic advantage to India, right? So what you need to understand is that the conventional route, the existing route, it starts from the port of Mumbai and ends at the port of St. Petersburg. It is 8,675 nautical miles longer. And then we have got the proposed route, that is this particular Chennai-Vladivostok corridor. It starts from the port of Chennai to port of Vladivostok in Russia, which is of 5,647 nautical miles, very much shorter than the conventional route. Proposed to establish a direct maritime route between Indian port city of Chennai and Russian Far East port of Vladivostok. Importance is first energy. Russia's Far East region is rich in resources like oil, natural gas, and minerals. This particular corridor would facilitate seamless access to energy imports from Russia to India, diversifying supply resources. Then we have got trade enhancement. So streamlines the trade between India and Russia by creating shorter route, bypassing Europe and Suez Canal. So we won't have to depend upon the Suez Canal route, right? So we can directly go via this route, thereby reducing the cost and transit times. Regional influence enhances India's presence in the Indo-Pacific and strengthens its strategic partnership with Russia. So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. So coming to the last article of the day, we have a particular village in Chhattisgarh, which has been chosen by the United Nations World Tourism Organization for its best tourism village upgrade program. So we have got the village in Chhattisgarh, that is Dudhmaras, sorry for the pronunciation if it's wrong, has been selected by the United Nations World Tourism Organization for its best tourism village upgrade program, highlighting its potential for sustainable tourism. This year, 55 villages across the world received the recognition for the best tourism village under the UNWTO initiative. Another 20 villages, including this particular village, that is Dudhmaras, were chosen for the best tourism village upgrade program, will receive support to enhance the tourism infrastructure, promote cultural heritage, and improve the quality of life. Dudhmaras was selected from more than 260 applications from 60 countries because of its cultural and natural richness and high potential to become an outstanding example as a top tier destination, right? So this is what you need to know. Again, this particular body becomes really important, that is UNWTO. Now this is a specialized agency of the United Nations that promotes responsible, sustainable, and universally accessible tourism. It was established in 1975, headquartered in Madrid, Spain, and serves as a global forum for tourism policy and advocacy. What are the key objectives? First is sustainable development. So it tries to promote tourism as a driver for economic growth, inclusive development, and environmental sustainability. Then it also supports the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Focuses upon goals such as Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, Goal 12, that is responsible consumption and production, and Goal 13, climate action. So it also provides technical assistance. For example, provides capacity building programs for member states to enhance tourism policy. For example, in this particular case, it would give some of the capacity building resources to this particular village, Dudmaras in Chhattisgarh. Knowledge sharing conducts research and provides data and insights through reports on global tourism, trends, policies, and best practices. Ethical tourism, important, promotes global code of ethical tourism to ensure responsible practices across the tourism industry. Next is functions and activities, data collection. So it publishes the annual UNWTO World Tourism Barometer, which tracks the global tourism trends. Important, do remember, World Tourism Barometer is published by the UNWTO, that is World Tourism Organization, United Nations World Tourism Organization. Assists governments in creating tourism-friendly policies, hosts conferences and events to discuss innovations, and emergency support, provides resources for crisis management in tourism, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic. Comprises of 159 member states, 6 associate members, and over 500 affiliate members, representing private sector entities, educational institutions, and non-governmental organizations. Next aspect, significance, economic. First is, again, you need to understand, tourism is a major part of the overall GDP of the world, right? So it accounts for 10% of the global GDP and supports 1 in every 10 jobs, right? So over here, the role of UNWTO is very important. So it plays a key role in revitalizing tourism economies, particularly in least developed countries, LDCs, and SIDS, small island developing states. Cultural exchange promotes cross-cultural understanding and heritage preservation through tourism. Next, climate actions. It advocates for reducing carbon footprints in tourism and supporting ecotourism. Very important. So for example, we have got in Kerala, and even in other states also, we have got this concept of ecotourism, right? So that is important. Then we have got recent initiatives. So the Tourism for SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals platform was launched to align tourism development with that of UN SDGs. Campaigns like Restart Tourism to support the post-COVID recovery, right? For example, you have got some of the countries like Sri Lanka, which are primarily dependent on the tourism aspect. So after the COVID, they witnessed a sort of a slump in the overall number of tourists. So over there, the UNWTO really helped. Focus programs on digital transformation in tourism to enhance the technology integration in the industry. So that is what you need to know with respect to this particular article. I hope this session was fruitful for you. Do let us know through your likes and comments. That is it. All the best. Thank you so much.